Yohimbine and rauwolsine are probably the strongest legal fat burners that are out there. The way that they work is intense, and we're going to talk about how they work so that you can understand how much to take, when to take it. This isn't one of those videos where you just say, okay, Thomas told me what the supplement is, now I'm going to turn the video off because I know. This is something that, because of its intensity, you should probably watch the video and understand how it works. It'll also teach you when to use it, how to use it, when the best time to use it, because if you just take it, it's not going to work. But hands down, this is probably the most controversial legal fat burner. Like, it's gone in and out of style because some people say it's too much. But the reality is how it works is effective, and there's a lot of evidence behind it. So Yohimbine and rauwolsine are major appetite suppressants, but they have very direct effects on lipolysis itself, the actual mobilization of fat. So we're going to talk about how all that works. And after today's video, I put a link down below for ARMRA colostrum. They've been a sponsor on this channel for a long time, but colostrum is one of my favorite things to take, especially for gut health. So colostrum has bioactive compounds in it, and ARMRA is unique because their colostrum is cold processed. So the bioactive compounds don't get broken down and destroyed like they would in other brands of colostrum. So that link down below at tryarmra.com/Thomas is for a special discount off of ARMRA colostrum. When I had a serious gut issue about a year and a half ago after eating some really bad sushi, what ended up happening was I was destroyed for months. And if it wasn't for ARMRA colostrum, I probably would have lost another 15, 20 pounds on top of what I did lose from it. The reason I say that is because it restored my gut health like that. And we're talking about it from a different layer than just like a probiotic. We're talking about it from actually providing over 400 different bioactive compounds that are like a living food. It's more of a food than it is a supplement. So if you're dealing with some gut issues or you're trying to restore gut health, I highly recommend this stuff. So that link down below in the top line of the description, tryarmra.com/Thomas. So Yohimbine is what is called an alpha-2 adrenergic receptor agonist. All right, what does that mean? It means that it binds to a particular receptor, but it doesn't actually take action on the receptor. It's like a phony molecule that blocks the receptor, right? It plugs the receptor. Rauwolsine, maybe you've heard of that before, is really just a more refined, like more fine-tuned version of Yohimbine that is said to have less potential side effects on like the sympathetic nervous system, perhaps less jitters, perhaps less of the shaking and stuff like that. We'll get into that. But let's go ahead and look at the science of how Yohimbine works so we can understand how to use it for fat loss. So if you look at a study that was published in the journal Research in Sports and Medicine, they gave subjects 10 milligrams of Yohimbine 2 times a day or placebo. What they found in this particular human study is that Yohimbine triggered a massive reduction in body fat percentage. So they had a 7.1% decrease in body fat percentage. Okay, they also saw that there was a massive decrease in total fat mass without any decrease in lean body mass or muscle at all. So meaning it was directly targeting fat cells itself, which is quite interesting because when you look at the world of fat burners, you'll see thermogenics, which, thermogenic agents will increase body temperature and you might lose some muscle with it too. But things like Yohimbine, rauwolsine seem to be specifically targeted when it comes down to fat. So we look at kind of how it works. We look at a study that was published in the journal ISSN that gave subjects Yohimbine and then measured their blood 30, 60, and 90 minutes afterwards. At all time marks, they saw increases in what are called free fatty acids, but they also saw increases in glycerol, which is really important to note. Because when our fat is in a storage form, it is in a form called a triglyceride, which is 3 fatty acids bound to a glycerol molecule. So when you burn fat, what happens is, or when you mobilize fat rather, you have glycerol and fatty acids breaking apart. So when you test the blood and you see these in free form, you know that something has broken them up and you are now going through lipolysis or liberating fats into the bloodstream. Now, in addition to this, they saw an increase in norepinephrine, which tells us that Yohimbine and rauwolsine are working on the sympathetic nervous system to potentially increase norepinephrine to ultimately increase lipolysis. The same reason why if you were to just go sprint or do something stressful or high intensity activity, you're going to have an increase in norepinephrine that's going to liberate some fat. But caffeine does that, exercise does that. What's particularly unique about Yohimbine? So with this, we look at mechanistic stuff in an in vitro study. This in vitro study was published in the European Journal of Clinical Investigation. So what they did is they found that when they took yohimbine and treated a fat cell with it, or just cultured cells in general, they saw that it increased the activity of epinephrine, but it increased sort of the effectiveness of epinephrine to increase lipolysis or increase fat mobilization. Not necessarily burning, but mobilization. They saw that just 0.2 milligrams per kilogram of yohimbine was enough to increase glycerol levels within the bloodstream and fatty acids and increase norepinephrine levels by 40 to 50%. So not only was it increasing norepinephrine itself, but it was increasing how potently the epinephrine could kickstart fat loss. So for one, it was making norepinephrine act upon the fat cell better with more of it. And number two, it was actually blocking the alpha-2 adrenergic receptor at the fat cell itself. We'll talk more about what that means, but essentially the fat cells have like a layer of these adrenergic receptors. Okay, and when those normally get occupied, it's going to actually block fat loss from occurring. But in this case, it was actually hitting these receptors in sort of a fake way so that the fat could actually be liberated at the fat cell. This will make more sense in just a little bit. So alpha-2 adrenergic receptors on a fat cell itself will block lipolysis. Okay, they block lipolysis. So when you have a yohimbine molecule that is fitting into this, you are blocking the potential action of something that would normally block fat loss. So it's almost like you have a fake plug sitting in this receptor that's saying, okay, I'm a decoy, go ahead and let fat burning occur. So the alpha-2 adrenergic receptor thinks that it's getting acted upon, but it's really just getting acted upon by an agonist, by not the real thing, right? So you're initiating fat loss in a very interesting way. So the Journal of Medical Hypothesis had taken a look at yohimbine, and they realized that there's three main ways that fat loss is occurring, which makes it a very unique fat loss supplement. For one, there is a direct activation of the sympathetic nervous system. More epinephrine, more norepinephrine, more adrenaline, whatever you want to say, right? Like, so more sympathetic activity, same kind of thing you'd get with sprinting or caffeine. Okay, not a big surprise there, but still pretty cool. There's also an interference with the feedback loop at a presynaptic level. This is interesting, where alpha-2 adrenergic receptors would normally get acted upon and actually stop the release of epinephrine in the first place. So basically, it's happening at sort of a nerve level where it's preventing a negative feedback loop that would normally stop the production of epinephrine. So in this case, not only are you stimulating epinephrine, you're having a double whammy additional surge of epinephrine because you're stopping it, sort of like how an SSRI works with serotonin. So you're blocking this serotonin reuptake in a way. In this way, you're sort of blocking the epinephrine reuptake so that your body produces more, if that makes sense. And then of course the third method is the one we talked about, which is the actual blockade on the fat cell itself. So it actually allows the fat cell to release its lipids and release its free fatty acids because it's getting occupied by this agonist. What does this mean in human terms? It means that yohimbine works upon three unique ways to burn fat and is highly potent. And why is it questionable? Like, why are people concerned? Because it is definitely a major sympathetic nervous system activator. So if you are prone to stress, it might make you more stressed. If you're prone to anxiety, it might make you more anxious. If you're prone to just being jittery, it could make you more jittery, which is why I would recommend in your case Rauwolsine, because Rauwolsine is going to be a little bit cleaner burning if you want to call it that. Now, I want to talk about the science of how this works for just a second, how fat loss actually occurs and how yohimbine comes into the equation specifically. What happens when you start to sprint or something like that is you have norepinephrine that is released. And norepinephrine then binds to a beta adrenergic receptor. So it binds to its little receptor, and that triggers an enzyme. And that enzyme converts ATP, the energy molecule, into what is called cyclic adenosine monophosphate. Okay, now this happens with caffeine too. So you consume caffeine or yohimbine, this happens. Cyclic adenosine monophosphate then activates what's called protein kinase A, which then activates something called perilipin and hormone-sensitive lipase. Hormone-sensitive lipase then goes to a fat cell or to a triglyceride, and it says, hey, go ahead and unlock and release the fatty acids. When these alpha receptors on a fat cell are stimulated, essentially the whole system stops and fat burning slows down. Right? So the goal with yohimbine is to block these receptors so that they can't get acted upon. Therefore, fat loss is never throttled down. As a matter of fact, we've even seen evidence that it can help prevent fat accumulation, which is quite wild. So this whole process is actually increasing the sensitivity of a fat cell to epinephrine. So you have the two things happening. Increasing epinephrine from your activity, but now that epinephrine has a much more powerful impact on the fat cell. Whereas before, you might have 20 darts going towards a cell and only 2 are gonna hit a fat cell. But in this case, you got 20 darts and 18 of them are gonna hit. So your effectiveness, your efficiency of epinephrine to burn fat is much, much higher. There was a study that was published in the Journal of Biological Chemistry, and they took rodent model adipose tissue, and they found that when there was more alpha-2 adrenergic receptors, they would actually store more fat and have hyperplasia, which means that the more alpha-2 receptors you have that are open, the more likely you are to store fat. So when you take something like Yohimbine and you block these receptors, you don't only increase fat mobilization and fat loss, you actually block fat gain from occurring, which is pretty darn wild. So what does this mean? How do you use it? Well, the first most important thing to note is that yohimbine and rauwolscine are mobilization agents. They are not oxidation agents. They do not burn the fat. They mobilize the fat. So if you were to sit down at your desk and pop yohimbine or rauwolscine, you might feel the effects from an adrenaline perspective, but you're not going to really get a benefit. You're not going to burn fat. Okay, remember, you are gifted with this 40 to 50% increase of epinephrine acting upon a cell. This is your opportunity to use it. This stuff works amazingly well if you take it before sitting in a sauna, or you take it before doing some cardio, or you take it before a high-intensity workout, or if you take it during a fast. Like if you take it during a fasted state, or when you are not eating and you're in a serious deficit, but particularly in a fasted state, it's going to be monumentally better because A, epinephrine is already elevated when you're fasting. B, you're going to increase that epinephrine more. C, you're going to increase the effectiveness and the efficiency of the epinephrine that's in your body, and you're going to increase its potential to liberate more fat by 2 to 3 times the amount because you're taking yohimbine. So all these things are stacking on top of each other. So the ideal situation, fasted in the morning, taking yohimbine, and then doing a workout, all in that fasted state. But the interesting thing is, it's a huge appetite suppressant as well. Why? Because when you are kickstarting these systems, like cyclic adenosine monophosphate, this whole process is going where fat is liberated, it's sort of a feedback mechanism to tell your brain and your body that you have fuel on hand and you're comfortable. It's just the same way that when you're deep into a fasted state, you're usually not that hungry. You might be hungry in the beginning, but then if you're 16, 18, 20 hours into a fast, you're not hungry. Most people will tell you that because you have enough fats circulating in the bloodstream where leptin is controlled, ghrelin's controlled, because you have fuel, albeit not food, it's fuel, right? So by blocking these alpha-2 adrenergic receptors and by liberating fats, your body and your brain says, I'm okay. So 10 milligrams of yohimbine prior to your workout, and then 10 milligrams maybe an hour after your workout to control appetite. Pretty darn powerful. But again, I've become more of a fan of rauwolscine recently, especially as it seems to have a more potent effect on appetite specifically. As always, keep it locked here on my channel. See you tomorrow.